Cindy, should we get going?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gabby. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. My name is Cindy Chan Rubik. I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Planning and Development, and I lead the Central, North, and Northwest Planning regions. I'm going to also introduce some of the other folks on the call from my department, as well as from CDOT, and then I'll let Alderman Burnett say a few words as well. First, we have Gabby, who welcomed everyone, and she's with our communications division at the department. Fernando Espinoza, you want to wave, Fernando, to the screen so everybody knows you. He's one of our planners in the central planning area. Max Lyon, his video is not working, so he can't wave, but I'm sure he is waving. And he's also one of our planners in the central area. And then we have David Smith from Department of Transportation with us as well. This is a follow-up meeting from a meeting we had last fall about the local impact funds, and we also did a more kind of big picture survey last fall, and so this is kind of to report on the outcome of both the community meeting and the survey, and then we've provided a new survey that reduces the priority projects down to 5 projects, because our goal here is really to get feedback and to understand you know, which project we should be moving towards. Okay, so let me also welcome Alderman Burnett. Alderman.
Hello, everyone. So this is what we wanted to do. So let's do it. We want to see how we can use the NOF funds to put back in the community these opportunities. So we're looking to work with you all on that. So thank everyone for being here, and I thank the Department of Planning and their crew for doing this with me, so we can try to encourage folks to give us stuff to spend the money on. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alderman Burnett. We have also invited Alderman Cicho Lopez, who's, I can see he's on. I don't know if he's able to unmute and say hello.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Alderman Burnett as well, and everybody for coming. I think it's important that we work together on this important issue, right, to make sure that the local impact funds are allocated appropriately and with community feedback, as we should. So I look forward to being part of the conversation, listening carefully to constituents, and whoever we can support and help in our end. We're glad to have this opportunity to discuss this, and thank you again to DPD for the invitation.
Thank you, Alderman. I'm glad you were able to join us. We also invited Alderman Irvin, but it's been a long, busy day for City Council, so I don't know if everyone that we invited is able to join us. Why don't we go to the next slide so people can see our agenda for the evening. So we've done introductions. We'll go over the meeting format and explain again with an update of the status of the local impact funds, and then the public feedback we've received to date. And then we'll go over the 5 priority projects, and we will do a live polling during this meeting. So that's the interactive part of the meeting. And then we'll also have time. We'll do some Q&A before the polling, and then we'll do some more Q&A after the polling. And if folks want to stay and have kind of a verbal discussion, we'll have time for that as well. And we do want to end the meeting by 7, because we know everyone is very busy. So that's our goal. We did have about just over 100 people registered for the meeting tonight. We checked earlier today on the survey, and over 700 people have completed the survey, which is great. Oh, thank you. And so let's go to the next slide, because we'll just start going through the deck that we prepared for you all. So as you know, this is a Zoom webinar format. The meeting is being recorded, and we'll have the video posted on our webpage. As it says, the chicago.gov/West Loop. This is a resource page for really all the initiatives from the Department of Planning and Development that impact the West Loop area. And if you have a question, please use the Q&A function for any questions that you have. All your questions and concerns and ideas are valid. And then we have city department staff who can respond to the question either in writing or verbally. Next slide, please. And really, it was in our discussions with Alderman Burnett, he has quite a bit of local impact funds that are attributed to his ward. And, you know, he asked us to kind of work with him on a way to gather feedback on how we should be spending that money. So we just generated this map to be helpful. There are some limitations to how we can use local impact funds. For example, it has to be within the downtown zoning boundary. And then we have other identified markers on this as well. Next slide. So since the inception of the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, a total of $4.7 million in local impact funds have been collected for Alderman Burnett's ward. And some of that money collected was used to build and complete the West Loop Library. Some of that money has been collected and assigned to the Skinner Park Fieldhouse as part of those planned development projects. There's also an additional $2 million that has been approved in TIF for Fieldhouse design. And then another, some of the local impact funding was assigned to Lake Street lighting, again, as part of a specific planned development project. Oh, can you go back? Oh, Alderman Irvin, you've been able to join us. Thank you so much. Did you want to say a few words?
No, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. But thank you for joining us. And so with all of that money that's already been assigned, as of April 1st, we did tally up, there's 2.9 million that we have collected and available for use in the 27th ward for the West Loop downtown area. Next slide, please. So there are specific code requirements that we have to meet. Again, the local impact funds are really funded from 10% of the neighborhood opportunity funds. When in the ordinance, if the plan development does not specify a specific improvement, then the ordinance says that the department, in consultation with the local aldermen, may allocate funds to eligible improvements anywhere in the downtown area. And the eligible types of projects, parks and green space, pedestrian and streetscape improvements, bicycle networks, transportation improvements, buried utilities, restoration of landmark buildings, and improvements to public facilities. Next slide. So we had a meeting last fall, as I said, and we had about 100 people registering for that meeting. And then we had a lot of comments at that meeting that I hope you see we've tried to incorporate in this next round of our input process. Many comments were about the voting process. People wanted to have one vote for one person. And this is kind of a, you know, we may need to talk about this a little bit more, but of course, with any kind of survey that is put out, you know, it's not run by the Board of Elections. It's not, it's a survey. So nothing is foolproof, but our hope with this new survey is that it's much more specific in terms of the 5 priority projects, so that we can get that a more direct feedback. And we also incorporated the first question in the survey is to try to prevent you know, some hacking or a bot from doing the survey multiple times in a row. So that first question you'll see when you do the survey was meant to try to prevent this from happening. But if someone has the intention to manipulate the survey, that there's very little we can do to prevent that. So another request at the community meeting last fall was that we coordinate with the aldermen in the West Loop. And as you can see, we have invited all of the aldermen who are impacted by any of the 5 priority projects, and we've briefed them in advance as well. And then there was concern about representation of the residents and the community groups. And so, really we have been careful to make sure that we are transparent in our process, and you have received the information kind of all at the same time. So specific improvement requests from that meeting. We did get a request from a representative from WCA that Madison Street be improved for pedestrian safety. We also received 3 requests for Hubbard streetscape improvements. We received a request for new public green space to be wherever in the West Loop. We did receive also a request for pedestrian safety improvements near Skinner West School, as well as for Halsted Street traffic improvements. Next slide, please. And then the survey that we did last fall, it was kind of a big picture survey because we were starting from kind of a general geography, and we really wanted to narrow it down. And we had over 1,000 respondents, which is great. And you can see in the top right corner, we've broken down how many people live and work in the West Loop and how many people actually participate in community meetings, which is very, the participation is very strong, which is fantastic. And what we found in terms of what's most important for people is who responded in the survey was to have new, expanded, or rehabilitation of public facilities, including planning and design costs. So this is good. This tracks with the funding that's already been assigned and used for the West Loop Library, for example, and the funding that has been already assigned to the Skinner Park Fieldhouse. Somewhat important was park and green spaces that are publicly owned, restoration of landmark buildings or contributing buildings in a landmark district, and then pedestrian, streetscape, and infrastructure improvements up to CDOT standards and the city's landscape ordinance. We had other important feedback that I thought was illuminating for us. An overwhelming number of the respondents, 94%, did not want the LIFT money spent in the Fulton Market Innovation District's new residential area. So this was something that is really good feedback to have. And then we also had a lot of respondents specifically insert a request for a covered market on Randolph Street. And then we had also some respondents specifically request for Skinner Park improvements. And then some other requests, including new transit station planning, Hubbard street improvements, more green space, more arts and seating, security improvements, bicycle network improvements within Greektown, and then a new park, which is an initiative called Cap the Kennedy that others have talked about in the past. Next slide. So we put this disclaimer here, we are going to be showing some images, and we just want to make it very clear that the images we're showing are illustrative only. They've not gone through any kind of design or engagement process. The whole point of getting this feedback, again, is to just try to determine, along with the aldermen who are impacted, what project we should choose to go to the next step in terms of an actual design and costing it out and doing engagement. And so we just want to make sure people understand when they see the following slides with some images, they're just illustrative. They're not the actual design. Next slide. So here are the 5 projects based on the meeting and the survey. Madison Street improvements for pedestrian safety and landscaping, Randolph Street improvements for streetscape, pedestrian safety, landscaping, and improved bicycle network, Hubbard Street improvements, again, also by pedestrians. You'll see a theme: pedestrian safety, landscaping, lighting, and improved bicycle network. And then pedestrian safety around Skinner Park and Skinner Elementary School. Since they're right next to each other, we kind of grouped them together. And then a public open green space, since we did get that comment a few times, but we would have to determine the location of that in the next step. Next slide. Madison safety and street improvements. So this is just to show you the stretch of Madison that we would be looking at, and you can kind of see that it overlaps different ward boundaries, which is why we've invited the other impacted aldermen to this meeting. Next slide. And this is the image on the left, again, illustrative image only, and it was from the West Loop Design Guidelines, which recommended that first the medians be removed from the street, which, as you all know, those were removed. And then the second phase of the proposal would be to do the pedestrian improvements, the bump outs and the crosswalks and that sort of thing, and some improved landscaping. So these really are from the West Loop Design Guidelines. So I'm going to turn the next two slides over to Max Lyon, who's our Central Region Planner, and he's going to explain where, in addition to this surveying that we're doing, we're also, he's also working on surveying Madison Street to determine if it's a good candidate for pedestrian street designation in the zoning code. We've completed that work for Fulton Market and Randolph Street. And so we wanted to kind of work our way down on Madison Street. And so he'll explain this, and it's completely separate from this this survey. It's completely separate from the LIF. It's just something that we thought, since we are talking about Madison Street and we have everyone here on the meeting, we just wanted to give you a status update on this. So Max, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Cindy. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the lack of a camera. It's not working today, but we'll press on. So pedestrian streets are essentially a zoning designation for the city. And since we're talking about pedestrian safety on many of these streets, and especially on Madison, pedestrian street designation kind of works in tandem with that, in the sense that when we designate a street a pedestrian street, it gives us a little bit more leverage to enhance certain aspects of the street that are pedestrian friendly, to start prioritizing pedestrian safety on the street, and to start even thinking long-term about, you know, what other uses can be used around that street versus, you know, streets that tend to have non-pedestrian uses such as loading bays and you know, any other heavy industrial use or heavy, you know, truck traffic, any sort of traffic that's not going to be pedestrian friendly. So pedestrian street designations allow us to kind of take advantage of that. And for example, prohibited through there are such things as drive-throughs, gas stations, car washes, vehicle sales, all the types of things that would attract, you know, non-pedestrian friendly type of vehicles. And being able to create this standard gives us not only leverage, but allows us to start evaluating the buildings that are already on that stretch. And to do that, we look for 5 different criteria. Down here in the dark blue box, we see standards for developments on P streets. So when we look at a certain segment of the city or a certain stretch of street, we look for these 5 characteristics in the buildings that are already there, and we try to think ahead in the short-term future and try to extrapolate what types of buildings can be put in the other places along the stretch. So to get more specific, we actually performed a P Street study, an initial survey on this stretch of Madison. So this is the stretch between the Kennedy Expressway to the east on the right of the screen. And then on the left, it stretches all the way to West Ogden Avenue. So this is the stretch we actually physically walked up and down and took a survey of all the existing parcels that are already there, which are highlighted or outlined, I should say, in red. And in order to receive a designation, these P streets need to have a high concentration of existing stores and restaurants. They need to be mostly continuous pattern of buildings abutting the sidewalk, no big empty lots, no you know, massive parking lots. We need doors and entrances abutting the sidewalk so that people actually have places to go. We need a lot of storefront windows abutting the sidewalk so people can actually see into these businesses and actually be attracted to them. And we need very few vacant stores. That is a little harder to do these days, post-pandemic, but pre-pandemic, that was an obvious criteria to have. And I will, with that, turn it over to Cindy once again.
Thanks, Max. So the next proposal is the Randolph Street improvements for streetscape, pedestrian safety, landscaping, and improved bicycle networks. Randolph is a very wide street right now, and it's already being studied by CDOT. So this is definitely something that was also identified in the West Loop design guidelines. Next slide. As well as the Fulton Market Innovation District plan update. So again, this is an illustrative vision, not the actual design, but you know, it identifies the opportunity for open spaces, for gathering areas, and still have areas for loading and pedestrian safety, of course, and landscaping. So this would all need to be designed. The specific request for a covered market would need to be considered at that point. It's really too early to kind of go into any details of what this would entail. I also want to point out that Randolph Street, the portion that's in the middle, is also an IDOT section. So any work that is done to Randolph Street would need to go through a pretty lengthy process because of that different status of this Randolph being in the IDOT jurisdiction as well. Next slide. And Hubbard Street improvements. So this is for pedestrian safety, improved bicycle network, landscaping and lighting. So, and I also wanted to point out that there is some money that's already been funded for viaduct improvements that are right next to this Hubbard Street. So I just wanted folks to know that, you know, they should be even separate from this survey and separate from the local impact funds. There's already for the industrial corridor a plan to improve the viaducts with just, you know, repair and maintenance type of improvement. Next slide. And again, these are images of the left one is current conditions and the right one is an illustrative vision, again, from the Fulton Market Innovation District plan update. It's just illustrative. We received a lot of comments while we went through that planning process that, you know, people didn't want to lose parking spaces. And so, you know, that we heard that, but we also have not proceeded with any kind of design yet because we would really need to secure funding to do that before we would go and do an actual design and do more community engagement. But we think this is an opportunity. There's not even a sidewalk here on the south side, and you know, there's all this artwork to enjoy, but it's hard to enjoy it from the other side of the street. So that's one of the projects to vote on as well. The next slide. And then we've heard a lot of requests about Skinner Park, and the new field house already has some funding associated with it. And then there was requests about pedestrian improvements around the park as well as the elementary school. So next slide. So you can see here, there's just, again, these are illustrative examples of how pedestrian improvements could be completed around this area. But, you know, the improving, obviously, the sidewalk and the crossings, especially between the park and the school, is pretty critical. Next slide. And the public green spaces, you know, we would need to identify a location to spend this money for, but and we just wanted to make sure folks knew that we do have 2.6 million already funded towards a new field house. And that is mostly with TIF increment financing from the Central West TIF. But here are some examples of, green spaces, some in the public way, some as parks. And there's been a discussion with another project between the tracks about creating a green space at Kinsey and Racine at that triangle. So that's an option as well. So before we do the live polling, we're going to try to answer some of these questions in the Q&A. There was a question. Oh, Gabby, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So there's just a question. The first one up is, what is the amount of lift from the 25th and 28th ward? I don't know if you have that on hand.
I think Fernando might have that handy, so he'll get back to that. But I don't think it's really relevant for the polling, so we can maybe respond to that later.
Okay. One of the questions was, will these slides be posted to the website earlier? Yes, there's a draft presentation there already that you can download right now. There's a question, where exactly is FMID's new residential area?
Oh, great question. So for many years, under the previous administration, when the planned manufacturing district of the Kinsey Industrial Corridor did not allow residential uses, and that PMD was then removed and replaced when downtown was expanded in 2016, 2017. But even with that downtown designation, the area between Lake and Hubbard, where the train tracks are and so on, that area was allowed to be downtown use, but not allowed to have residential uses. So this was back in 2017 or so, right? And so that's why you see a lot of office buildings, hotels, that sort of thing were approved during that time. And then when we hit the pandemic, and obviously there were a lot of impacts to the office and hotel sectors. And also we looked at a lot of the industrial users. At the time when we didn't allow residential uses, it was partly because we did not want to have a conflict between the industrial users who were still there and new residential users. And that was a totally fair concern. But when we looked at it again in 2019, we were finding that really a lot of the industrial users had already left to other areas of the city in other PMD areas. And we also were finding that if they hadn't left, they were trying to sell their land. So we saw this quick transition with this area. And so the concern about not having residential was really no longer an issue. And really, when we looked at the ideal environment for a downtown area, it really is to have live, work, play, dine, to have a vibrant kind of resiliency as well. You're seeing kind of what happens right in the downtown core when it's primarily office only. It has really been severely impacted by the pandemic and by this remote working transition that we're going through. So it's really a good thing to have a variety of uses in this area now that we're able to do it. What are the other questions?
So there's a few that are kind of related. So is there a reason a safe bicycle network is included in Hubbard and Randolph proposals, but not for Madison?
That's a good question. I think it's something that would have to be studied if it were to be selected as one of the priority projects. As the priority project, again, the CDOT would have to undergo kind of a study of whether or not it would make sense to incorporate bicycle lanes or not. We don't want to predetermine that, but it's definitely something that could be considered.
It's a question, how can the public request DPD staff to survey potential P streets?
Oh, just email us, dpd@cityofchicago.org. We'd love to hear from you, and really any other feedback we welcome as well.
Great. How would a P Street designation on Madison impact the design for proposed lift fund use?
I don't think it does, because the P Street impacts really what it prevents is new curb cuts from happening, new drive-throughs. So really it creates an even better pedestrian environment over time. And so I think it would just be a good thing to have both potentially, because then, you know, you've got the P Street kind of for regulating the built environment of the buildings. And then if you're able to do the public realm improvements at the sidewalk level, then it kind of works hand in hand. But regardless of the outcome of the decision for the lift funding, we would look to proceed with some length of Madison being P Street.
Great. Have RFPs been issued for the projects related to the already available funding, referencing Kinsey improvements in Skinner Park Fieldhouse?
No. So the Kinsey, I think you're talking about the Triangle Park, potentially that we've not started that work yet, because the way that funding is triggered is when the permit has been issued for that project, and then we would look to work with our friends at CDOT to see what the next step would be once funding has been secured. But we wouldn't issue an RFP until there's enough funding. For the Skinner Park Fieldhouse, the money so far is really just sitting there. There's been a lot of discussion amongst the park district and the community groups about where it could go, frankly. And so that decision hasn't been made yet. And so they have not been able to proceed with any design.
Thanks. This is kind of a longer question. From what I understand, safety improvements around Skinner School could be paid via the separate TIF around that area that has a lot more money than the LIF. Whereas the Madison Street improvements do not qualify for TIF and therefore make the LIF funding that much more important for any project spanning Madison. Can you speak to whether that's true, and if there are factors like that should play into prioritizing how the 4 to 5 projects are funded via local impact fund or tax increment fund?
Well, this person has done their homework. That's what I love about Chicago. People are so involved, and they know what's going on. Absolutely, that is accurate, and that's also kind of why we identified the funding that's already been secured for some of these items. We want people to make an informed decision, so that is true. That the work that the Skinner Park and Skinner Elementary School do sit within that Central West TIF. So improvements could be funded from that TIF. It would have to go through, the TIF approval process, and I do want to say that, in terms of DPD, we don't really have, we think all of these projects are good projects. And so we know that there are people who feel strongly with maybe 1 or 2 of these projects on the list and don't feel strongly about others. We think they're worth all, pursuing at some point. It's just, we just really wanted to figure out, try to get as much input as possible to inform this decision that we have to make. So for Madison Street, that is true. It's not covered by any TIF district. So there would be very limited ability to fund these improvements. That is true. Randolph Street also, Parts of it are within the Kinsey Industrial TIF, parts of it are not. So that is also a place where we would have some gaps. And there was a question we were sent earlier in the week about the Kinsey TIF and the status of the Kinsey TIF. The Kinsey TIF is expiring at the end of this year. But luckily for, I think, all the people on this call, the Springfield state legislators passed and approved an extension for the Kinsey TIF. But the second step now is we have to go through an updated plan and a public engagement process. And then ultimately that TIF extension has to be approved by City Council. So, you know, we're in that process now, frankly, and you will be hearing at some point in the near future, you know, about this Kinsey TIF process. So that's something that Randolph Street, part of it could be. Same with Hubbard Street. The south side of Hubbard Street is within the Kinsey TIF boundary, but not the north side. So that's just FYI. And also the downtown zoning district also covers the south side of Hubbard, but not the north side. So we're limited, you know, in what the code will allow us to use. And then public open green space, it really, again, it depends on where we end up deciding where that green space should go. So we just wanted to include that because we did get that input that people just wanted more green space and, you know, maybe didn't need it to be specifically somewhere, but just wanted it somewhere in the area. So did we go through all the questions or are there more?
There's a lot more. I don't know if we'll be able to get through them all. I think, you know, we want to leave some time for the poll and everything. So this is, I think, just maybe a good question to end this part on. What is the time frame to start implementing any of these projects, and what is the decision-making process?
That's a great question. So the survey will be completed by midnight, June 6th. And so we'll gather the results of the survey. We're going to gather the feedback from today's meeting. And really, we're going to look closely. I mean, the survey is not foolproof. And so there's potential that, you know, we'll just look closely at the results. We'll try to figure out, you know, based on all the public input that we've received, which really is the best candidate for this LIFT funding. We'll talk with the impacted aldermen, and it depends in terms of timing of implementation. It really depends on the project, right? So because, for example, Randolph Street is an IDOT jurisdiction, that will, I expect any implementation of Randolph Street will take longer because of that, just that process. Whereas the other streets are not IDOT jurisdictions. So I just want people to be informed of the differences.
Great. Should we move on to the poll at this point, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, so I'm just gonna launch this right now within the group and leave it open for a few minutes for everyone to leave their choices.
Oh my gosh, you can see it happening. It's very interesting.
We'll leave it for another minute or so. It looks like we're at 80% responses so far out of the attendees.
We're not voting, just so you know.
we leave for about another 30 seconds or so?
All right. Does that look good? We've given everyone a chance at least.
All right, so we'll end it right now. And you can share the results.
Yeah, let's share the results.
Can you all see the results in your view?
I can see them. I just don't know if others can. We can verbally explain it too.
You know
Gabby.
what? This is Alderman Irvin. I'm not able to see the results.
Okay, I could do
Let's
a
verbally.
screen share too. Let me try sharing my screen just to make sure everyone can see it. 1 second. Okay. Looks like you can see it here. So far we have, do you live in the West Loop? 83% said yes, 17% said no.
Gabby, we're not seeing the
Oh, you're not seeing it?
the polling results. We're seeing the screen for the
Oh, for the Zoom.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
Let me see if I can try and do this. 1 second. All of the technical fun here. Can you see it now?
No, I can. It's still the PowerPoint.
Okay, Max, can you stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
That might
We
be-
could also just go through it verbally, Gabby.
Yeah, do you want to try that?
If we're having too much trouble sharing it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not showing on. Can you see it on my desktop now, or is it still the, no?
We just see the local impact fund PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure why it's deciding to do that.
You may have to, you know, when you go into the share screen, there are several screens that you can pick to pull up, and maybe you're not picking up the right screen.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's not for whatever reason reading the window because it's like a Zoom admin thing. But do you just want to read through it, Cindy?
Yeah, or should I try? Let me
Yeah, if you want to try.
Oh my God, let me try. Let's see if I can do this. Do you guys see this?
Just
No,
your desktop, just
I
your
think it's
desktop.
doing the same thing as Zoom.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
weird.
that is
Okay,
weird.
then, sorry. But if people press the poll button at the bottom, they can see the results too, right? So, but let's read them out, Gabby.
Yes. 52 people responded. Do you live in the West Loop? 83% said yes, 17% said no. Do you work in the West Loop? 75% said yes, 25% said no. Do you own property in the West Loop community? 73% said yes, 27% said no. And then I'm just going to go through the percentages. The selections were the Madison Street improvements had 33%. Then the Randolph Street improvements had 19%. Hubbard Street improvements, 13%. Skinner Park and Skiller Elementary School pedestrian improvements, 15%. And public open space, 19%. So the first was Madison Street, then Randolph and public open space were tied at 19%. And then Skinner Park at 15 and Hubbard Street at 13%.
Right. Great. Thank you, everyone. I saw a question in the Q&A that I just wanted to make sure we responded to. There was a question about, has a traffic study been done on the proposed P Street on Madison? They are concerned that this would impact day-to-day life. And I just wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding. When people hear about a pedestrian street, they think like the way in Europe where they have actually removed all of the cars and they've made the entire street for pedestrians only. That's not what we're talking about here. The pedestrian street is a zoning overlay that just prevents buildings from having a drive-through, from new drive-throughs, prevents new curb cuts from Madison Street, but Madison Street would remain as a vehicular street. So it doesn't change the traffic impact. It actually makes it better because you're not adding more curb cuts and drive-throughs, and that's those types of uses. The P Street also requires a certain amount of transparency for the building at the ground floor so that you have a certain level of active uses when you're walking down the street. So like think of our other pedestrian streets, the P streets that we have in Chicago is like Michigan Avenue, State Street, Oak Street. So all of the commercial streets that you can think of kind of near this area, Fulton Market, for example, Randolph Street, those are all P streets. So hopefully that answered that. In terms of next steps, of course, like I said, we would be continuing to evaluate the responses that we get. We'll work with the aldermen as well, and we're going to identify the top priority project, which we would then proceed with further study and design before we could implement. We will proceed with the P Street designation ordinance. Really, we have time now for more questions.
Should we go through the Q&A or?
Well, I think that we've kind of tried to answer a lot of these, it seems like to me. I feel like there was a question about cost for each of these projects. We kind of explained that at the beginning. We haven't costed these out because we haven't designed them, right? And for example, even the last one for the public park, we would need to identify where this public green space would go. So we couldn't even begin to describe the magnitude of cost until we can focus in on a specific project. Do you want to, since we have a few minutes left, we have about 10 minutes left, should we see if there are any folks who want to have a verbal conversation with at all?
Sure. If anyone would like to raise their hand, we can promote you to speaker for, just give everyone a minute if they are interested in asking a question or speaking directly. Let me start here.
Go ahead.
So a first person, promote to panelist. Second. All right, hello, Mr. Tamsat.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. You were able to hear you now if you'd like to.
So is this audio or video alone?
This is either, if you'd like to turn your camera on, you can.
Okay, I'll just do audio on this end. Just looking for my questions from before. Hold on. There is a Q&A. Okay, you cleared the questions on the Q&A, so I'll have to do it off the top of my head. In the summary of the first poll, there was a finding that more than 1,000 folks selected the Randolph improvement projects and specifically made comments in regards to a covered market. However, the concept being presented in the second poll doesn't reflect the input received from the first. So it appears to be an incomplete concept. And the reason that's important is because the Randolph covered market not only delivers public safety, but it also provides a linear park space stretching from Halsted to Union Park. That's 14 blocks of added community space, especially with the center lanes being owned by the state. That opens up the opportunity for all kinds of vendors and events and entertainment opportunities. So I'm wondering whether you can please update the concept for the Randolph Street improvements to include the covered market, which is a key selling factor because it addresses both public safety and green space.
Yeah, Moishe, thank you for your comment. I did kind of explain that when we went over that slide. Yes, I totally acknowledge that a lot of the survey respondents put in the covered market request specific. It was very specific, actually. What I explained is, that would be something that would have to be consulted, designed, and considered as part of the actual design process for the Randolph Street improvements. I didn't want to commit the city to kind of doing that without really having more thought put behind it. But
I'm thinking even of making a mention of it though, which would make it part of the concept. Not saying that it would be designed out, but it's not even mentioned in the second survey. And that's feedback from the first. What's interesting too, and I'll extend that, is there's a bias towards Madison Street. It appears as a first selection. It's not randomized order, so it's always first choice. They held a Madison Street safety meeting. They didn't release the live stream of that meeting for 1 week. Block Club immediately jumped on the meeting and didn't even report on any of the objections or any of the other issues with it. So, and Block Club displayed as its lead picture an image that we're being told is impossible for Madison. It included two-way bike lanes. There was the raised intersection image, which was pulled from, wasn't even based on Madison Street. And we're seeing comments on Twitter and other forums where people are saying, look, they're putting in twin protected bike lanes on Madison. And the bike community thinks that they're getting cyclist safety when the WCA repeatedly has stated that they're even considering banning bikes on Madison. They claim because they put parking as a priority that there is no room for bicyclists, even though the West Loop design guidelines, the plan was for a complete street, which would include bicyclists, pedestrians, buses, and cars.
Thank you.
And it just seems like the WCA is short-circuiting this whole process.
Excuse me, I just wanted to, we only have a couple more minutes left, so I just want to make sure we get some other speakers. So thank you for your comments. I don't know, Cindy, if you wanted to add anything.
No, I mean that there was another group who had a community meeting. I mean, there's community meetings happening all over. It's fine for other groups to have community meetings and talk about what they want to talk about. We're not going to be the gatekeeper of that or of journalists. So if they want to report whatever it is they want to report on, that's the USA. It's good stuff.
So LeVar, I'm gonna allow you to speak. Can you hear us? Are you there?
Look, it sounds like he's got his mute. He's got his microphone muted.
I'm gonna ask to unmute. LeVar, are you able to hear us or? I don't think he's there. So in the interest of time, we'll move on.
Yeah, let's move to Armando.
Armando, okay, 1 second.
Yeah, we'll just do it in the order we see it.
Yeah. Hello,
Thanks.
Armando.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Cindy, and thank you, Gabriella, and all your staff for putting this on tonight. Thank you so much. as you know, we've been advocating for Madison Street, but I do want to just say that, when I look at the other projects, I could get behind all of them, and that's the truth. Particularly those that are in regards to public safety. For example, safety around Skinner School and Skinner Park. I mean, I think those are, really, really important to consider. So as far as how we make this happen, I think identifying the funding sources. I mean, I appreciate the mention earlier about, TIF and providing some clarity on that. When it comes to the local impact funds, I mean, it sounds like we can use those on Madison. I do wonder if there is enough. So I wonder if there is a way to, obviously you had an accounting for how much is in there now, but my understanding is that these funds aren't due on developments until the permit stage. So I wonder if there's a way to know what that pipeline might be.
Yeah, we have a pipeline of a lot of projects.
Right.
Don't worry, there's more money coming, but this is the money we've already collected. That's just sitting, waiting for a project.
Okay, well, the other thing, thank you for that. So I'm looking forward.
I'm just going to limit, we only have time
Yes.
for one question.
Keep
so
going.
if you want to email us, we can follow up again. Thank you.
May Choi.
Yeah. Hello, May, are you there?
Yes, hi. Thanks, Debbie and Cindy. So I do have a general question. As more of a comment, I don't think it's really fair to ask to make a decision about pedestrian safety for various areas of the neighborhood. I think most of these projects center around pedestrian safety around the schools or Madison Street. So one of the issues that we have raised before was that 10% of the neighborhood opportunity bonus wasn't really enough to address the infrastructure needs of the neighborhood. I mean, that's before the ordinance was passed. And so I want to again raise that issue to the city and to all three aldermen, because you're in this meeting, that, if we're the economic engine of the rest of Chicago, it doesn't speak well for the governance that we're here having to make a choice between public safety of Madison or public safety around a park or a school. And I think that it's incumbent upon the city and our elected officials to work out these issues instead of asking us to pick and choose. I think that nobody wants, to have to pick and choose, especially when it comes to public safety. So I just want to leave it at that. Thank you.
That's a good comment. Thanks, May. It looks like we have two more.
Yeah. I believe
Robert. Yeah.
Hello, Robert.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Cynthia and Gabriella, for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. So I live nearby on Sangamon Street. I heard about this for the first time last week. It was really interesting. I don't own a car, and I hope that if you guys do, select one of the street improvements, whether it's Madison, Randolph, or Hubbard, that you find a way to include protected cycling infrastructure. I know recently a cyclist was killed on Madison Street, and it's kind of scary to bike around West Loop. And so I really hope that we find a way to make it work. Thank you for your effort.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Last one.
Julie.
Julie.
All right, 1 second. Hello, Julie, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, first of all, thank you for this. I think it's informative for people that don't really understand the process and to get it out to the community. So I'm a board member of the West Loop Community Organization, and I just wanted to hop on at the same time May was giving her sentiments. I was going to say the same thing. I don't think it's fair to the community to have to pick safety over any other improvements. So if there's a way that we can tier it so that safety comes first, specifically around the school and the parks, and then move backwards from there. I would agree that Madison is not necessarily, equipped for a bike lane. It's tragic what happened, but if there's a way that we can look to other westbound streets for really, how do I say, like really strong, bike safety lanes for an east-west situation, I think that makes more sense. I feel strongly, and I know a lot of people feel the same way. We shouldn't have to pick one project over the other.
Yes, and that's very good input. Thank you, Julie. And we'll do our best. Again, to find other sources, and in some of these cases there are other sources. So, we completely agree that safety is an important issue for us to consider. So, thank you for that feedback. All right, so we're going to end our meeting, but thank you very much. And if you have comments or questions, you can email us at dbd@cityofchicago.org. A lot of you also know how to reach me, so we see a lot of the same folks and talk to them on an ongoing basis, which is great. We are happy to, again, get your feedback. So we know a lot of you have busy schedules, but we really appreciate your participation tonight.
Thank you, Cindy, and people from the Department of Planning and people from neighborhoods, Alderman Burnett. I want to thank my colleagues, Alderman Citro Lopez and Alderman Jason Irving. With other money being in the pipeline, I don't see no reason why we can potentially, along with TIF money, be able to deal with all these projects. I'm a little concerned about a covered street because of safety, right? So I just need to see how a covered street would look with safety, right? Because we need more people to see more things going on, especially with cameras and everything else that we're using for safety. But I like to see if there's a possibility that we can possibly do all of these things, but we probably would have to do them all systematically, one at a time, right? And go from there. We are blessed to, first of all, we're blessed to have a great alderman. Just kidding. But we're blessed. We are blessed to have a prosperous area that everybody wants to do things in, and a lot of money coming to the community. And we had this option. We don't have these kind of options anywhere else in the city. So we are very blessed to be able to have this excess amount of money to be able to spend on projects. And I appreciate everyone who's participated in helping to make these things happen. And I look forward to trying to work on all these projects with all of you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to recap, we will have this video of the presentation available probably tomorrow on chicago.gov/westloop. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.